Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Leadership Now with me, Dan Pontefract. I have such a special guest, special friend, special Canadian, a fellow Canuck in the house, Canucklehead, Dr. Vince Molinaro. Vince, it's great to see you. Quick bio first, and then we're going to get into this wonderful book of yours called The Community of Leaders. So, well, who are you, Vince? You're a New York Times bestselling author. You're a strategic advisor to speaker, global expert to many, many different companies and organizations on the concept of leadership accountability. You're the founder and CEO of Leadership Contract Inc. LCI. Vince, you've worked with organizations from startups to Fortune 500s, 25 countries, hundreds of cities. You and your team are equip leaders, sorry, to navigate critical strategic shifts in their companies by scaling accountability and community, which we'll get into today. The author of 5 books, including classics like Accountable Leaders and the very famous The Leadership Contract. Your books and various programs are the foundation of many leadership programs in companies and organizations around this globe of ours. As a leader, Vince, you strive to practice what you preach by setting the tone of accountability every day. Yes, indeed. So, this newest book, Community of Leaders: What It Takes to Drive Strategy, Culture, and Change, is where we're going to spend some time catching up with on today as two friends. And so, first of all, Vince, one of the things that I love, because I grew up in Hamilton, Ontario, very close to an Amish community in Guelph, and you start out with a metaphor about the barn raising and how that metaphor is such a wonderful introduction to how community leadership and accountability can materialize. So, for those that aren't aware, what is a barn raising, and why and how is this a part of this wonderful new book?
Well, thank you for the introduction, and thanks for the opportunity to spend time geeking out with you on all things leadership. Well, the barn raising tradition really, for me, I was inspired as I write in the book years ago when I saw a Harrison Ford movie, Witness, where he's a Philadelphia cop, goes undercover into an Amish community because there was a murder in that community, and he was there to solve the murder. And so in one scene, they recreate a barn raising. And I knew of what a barn raising was, but never kind of got to see it play out in that movie. And that always stuck with me.
Mm.
And the time never sort of, when was the timing to bring that back? But it just stuck with me of a group of people coming together because, in those communities that primarily in, Northeast kind of Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Southern Ontario, as you referenced. It's a long tradition dating back to the 1800s. And when you are a family that's, in a rural community where agriculture is your way of life, a barn is essential. The challenge is a barn is not possible for a family to build on their own. So the community needs to come together. And so to me, that just represented a powerful metaphor for maybe possibly how we need to lead and work in our organizations today. So as I started doing research into the practice, what surprised me was how this active community only exists because of accountability.
Mm.
So then I'm going, this is like crazy. This can't be the case. And sure enough, it is. And so it really connected, the decade-long research I've done on leadership accountability, the writing that started with the leadership contract, all of our research and our practice that really said, this active community only happens because of accountability. And that was really that starting point. And as in fact, in June, I did a presentation, probably was the first presentation. The book wasn't released yet. And I shared this this tradition, this story, and someone in the audience was from an Amish community and said, "You are absolutely right. Accountability is critical, and if you shirk your responsibility or don't do a good enough job, they will let you know, and in fact, that you will be shunned by the community." And so that was sort of the starting point, and it's been great to see how this story has really been resonating with people as I've talked to them about it, and really capturing what is possible when we kind of combine accountability and community. And now our research also reveals that these two ideas are actually positively correlated. So based on the measures that we have, as we measure accountability and community, the two really work hand in hand.
Well, let's get into that. The book is packed with research. It's also packed with not just tactics and practical advice, but job aids, I would say. And one of those job aids that actually does a really, really good job of, I suppose, aligning community and accountability, of course, is your sort of, I guess you call it the two by two matrix, where on the y-axis is community, on the x-axis is accountability. And effectively for listeners who may not be watching, because I'll put the graphic on the video feed. On the top right box, the fourth quadrant, if you will, you've got high accountability, high community, of course, because community is high and accountability is high. Bottom left, of course, low accountability, low community, and so on for the top left and bottom right. So tell me a bit about now, Vince, this if it's the third book in the trilogy of accountability, leadership, and community. Tell me a bit about the two by two and how these forces align, and what ultimately we'll get into what we should be doing to get to the top right box. But just first of all, let's start with the alignment.
Well, it really, in a time-honored tradition of management consultants, we need to always have two by two. So check, I have respected that tradition in the consulting space because the world needs another two by two.
Yeah.
But personally, I've always found a two by two to be a useful construct, and really it fed out of our research. So in the book, we talk about weak leadership cultures that organizations have, anywhere from a rotting of zombies where everyone just shows up going through the motions Monday to Friday. I lived in an organization like that. It was my first job when I joined the workforce. Nice people, but nothing that really compelled them to do their best work day to day. And it was a rotting of zombies, right? And like every zombie movie, we've seen, the second you're bit by a zombie, you become one. And so that was my biggest fear. So after 4 years, I left. And so that would go in that lower left column, right? There's no accountability. There's no sense of community. And then there's others, like a stable of thoroughbreds, very driven, very competitive. There's sort of this accountability within a line of business, a department or function, but not for the greater purpose of the organization as a whole. So community, our accountability is high, but it's sort of single-mindedly focused with little attention paid to community. On the other side, you'd have high community where we all kind of get along, we're having fun, we celebrate birthdays, all those sorts of things, which are not a bad thing to do, but there isn't enough focus on driving results through accountability. That typically gets described to us as we work with our customers as a nice culture. We kind of, like being together, like being around, but we don't really have the courage to go after some tough things that we need to, the necessary conversations we need to have that drive the business forward. Ultimately, the outcome of that two by two was really the repeated theme we saw early on in our research, and it continued with the new round of research that we started just in the tail end of COVID, and it's in the book, because that's all ultimately about performance. So that top right box is about high accountability, high community, and that's ultimately what drives performance. Because what we have seen in our research repeatedly is that industry-leading companies report stronger leadership cultures. They describe having as a result, more inspiring cultures, whereas average and above average performing companies and poor performing companies tend to kind of, be in the other three quadrants.
Okay. So with that alignment, where I wanted to go next is sort of two parts. So we'll start with the first one, because eventually I want to ask you a bit about the sort of the 10 characteristics of a strong community of leaders. But before that, we need to perhaps kind of get into your definition. Well, what is community? And particularly, what is community for a leader? What does it mean, and how do we unpack that first?
Well, it really is, a model of leadership where leaders show up understanding that their job is really to pay attention to the culture and the work environment day to day. It's not a,
Mhm.
it's not a unique idea. You've written about that, others have as well. But a lot of leaders, tend to get heads down, focusing on their priorities, their performance objectives, without kind of elevating themselves and thinking about what is the environment that we're creating here. How do we foster this sense of community collegiality so we can work better? And it really stems from, this work around community started with the leadership contract book, where I talk about these 4 terms. And that book delivers a pretty direct message around personal accountability. And the 4th term is leadership as a community, and you need to connect with your peers and colleagues, build and foster relationships across the organization, bring more of a one company mindset, and on and on. And what surprised me when that book came out is that idea of community, which in many ways was the softest, if we want to use that language, resonated the most. And I can't tell you how many CEOs would say, I need to build a leadership community. If we're going to drive our strategy, if we're going to be successful, that's what I need to build. And so, you go by what's resonating, what's connecting, what are people really getting themselves attached to. So that was kind of a common theme that we saw. And then as we were bringing those ideas into companies, we just started to see it over and over again. And we started to kind of say, okay, so how are you describing a sense of community? And that's where the 10 characteristics come in. But back to the definition, it's leaders who prioritize relationships, who actively invest in relationships, who really show up thinking about what's in the best interest of the organization as a whole versus just being consumed with their own self-interest. And having that courage to work across boundaries, to drive change, to drive strategy, and to drive culture. Now, what's really, really fascinating as I've talked to folks, and I've kind of do this activity where I say, think about a leader in your organization, a manager, a leader, who you would define as a community builder. What do they do differently? And we know the answer instinctively. It's remarkable to me. Like, I don't need to have a big fancy definition. That's a Vince approved definition. It's like it's intrinsic in us as human beings. And those leaders, those community builders are already in our organizations. And what I hope that this book does is puts a spotlight on them to say, they really are the connective tissue. They really are the glue that kind of keep us together. And they do it even though everything is, there's nothing in it for them, right? There's nothing, they're not getting rewarded for it. It's probably not in their performance plan, and they do it anyways because that's how they're wired. And that's what we need to celebrate more of, because we need that in our organizations, like we had it in a barn raising, like we have it in communities around the world. There are these individuals that just favor community building as they work and as they lead. And I think we need more.
Well, amen to that. I think we do need more of that. And one of the passages of a few that I really liked from the book was as follows. True community builders understand the importance of operating with a one company mindset, acting in the best interest of the whole organization rather than pursuing personal agendas. So you've touched on the one company mindset already and this notion of community builders. So from that passage, what are the leaders doing that get it right for this one company mindset and then the interest of the whole organization as opposed to pursuing self versus, I guess, Vince, the ones that aren't and are
Yeah.
selfish or are doing the antithesis of the community building approach?
Yeah. So the thinking started in accountable leaders where we kind of ask, are you wired to be a community builder? And there, there's an activity we do when we're with leaders. They sort of stand in a line and we say, okay, well, this end is this. Do you operate out of self-interest or you operate out of collective interest? And you find your place on this line, and it creates fascinating conversations, right?
Wow.
And the people who admit, yeah, I got to be honest, I'm pretty much all about me. It's okay, right? Like it's good to know it because everyone else knows it. It's like how we interact. It's no surprise. But it's good to know it and to understand that we don't come at it that this is necessarily, this end of the continuum is necessarily all bad, or this end of the continuum, it's like knowing where you are and where you need to be given the task at hand, right? Do you operate with a one company mindset, or are you solely focused on driving the results of your line of business at the expense of company success. That's also important to know about yourself. But really, as I describe in the book, what I have found with the community builders, there's really a couple of things they do. First, they have to do their job. In other words, what I kind of take accountability and kind of say, well, there's an individual component of accountability. And so let's start there, right?
Hmm.
You can't go around asking anyone to be accountable unless you are first accountable yourself. There's an implicit rule. And if you've had a 4 or 5 year old kid, they're very good at calling out their parents where they go, wait a minute, you're asking me to do this and you're not doing it yourself. I don't
Yeah.
get that, right? So as humans, we can kind of smell that when a manager says one thing. I tell a story of years back when I worked in a retail store. Gary was a hiring manager, and he set the tone. He was great. He intimidated me a little bit because he set the standard so high, but I gave him everything I got because he inspired me. And then he got promoted to the flagship store. In came Steve, his predecessor, and Steve would literally every shift would say, "Don't do as I do, do as I say." And there I was, a 17-year-old, kind of going, I'm not sure how this is going to work. Wait a minute. You've got a standard for yourself that's different than the standard you have for us. Isn't that a double standard? So there I
Hmm.
was in my teens already. The leadership geek was starting to emerge, I guess. But so you gotta have your act together individually. Then you got to build accountability at your team, because when teams are working together across the organization, we've all seen it. When there's a team that's weak or not doing their job or is self-consumed only with what's in it for them, or they let other teams down, uh, it's hard to get to where we need to get to. So
Hmm.
team accountability is important. And then you've got to excel at shared accountability. So Dan, you and I are peers. We're in different departments. We are both on the hook for an important priority. The rules of the road are unclear. Well, how do we do that? Can you count on me? Have I invested in getting to know you? So we have a certain degree of trust. So work on that first. That's critical. And then the book goes into, then your job is around collective accountability. And it
Hmm.
takes each of the 10 characteristics and saying day to day, there's really simple ways that you can kind of accelerate the ability of your company to foster community and build a strong leadership culture, or you can fall into traps that really act as blockers. So a good example, if you're in a meeting, let's take the first one, having clarity around the strategy of the company. You're in a meeting and it's clear this meeting, like nobody knows what they're doing. There may be an agenda, but it's not tied to anything. So what do? Do you guys sit there for an hour and have a meeting inside your head about something else? Or do you go, wait a minute, hey, everybody, I don't understand how this meeting is tied to our strategy. Can someone explain that to me? Okay, if we can't answer that question, we should shut this meeting down and regroup when we're clear on how this is connected to a strategy. That's
Hmm.
it. Now, you're not going to be popular, right?
Right.
But it's the kind of simple work we have to do, right? Another one is holding each other accountable. You're in a meeting, people are doing this or blaming each other. You want to be really popular, ask who's accountable for the outcome, and you wait. People aren't going to like that, but that's part of what we have to do. So there's a lot of subtle ways day to day that we can just keep nudging the culture and nudging the organization forward so it can be as successful as it needs to be in achieving, its future success and strategy.
So it's one of the aligned truth bombs, I suppose, that I surmise from the manuscript was that, you make mention of the fact that leaders, no single leader can do all of this well. And you also point out in the book where, you know, CEOs or leaders feel like they don't have others to lean on. And there's this sort of like, well, we want you to be self-reliant. We need you to be resilient. Yet there's some, I don't know, intrepidation perhaps, Vince, to say, hey, I need to lean on you. My community needs to be emboldened. I need to build on top of that because, I'm the leader. But yet we have this hero CEO, hero leader syndrome
Yeah.
where I need to know it all. I need to do it all. If people see me as fallible, i.e., I need to tap into my network to help build something or a community as such. There's this kind of irony, right? And so tell me, unpack this for me where have we got past the hero CEO, hero leader era? Are we finding ways in which for leaders to be more humble, that they do know that they have to tap into this community building approach? Like, help me figure this one out for us.
Well, it's a great point because I think the book does provide an alternative to that model. And it's not that that model is necessarily wrong, right? In a crisis,
Hmm.
we do need somebody to step up to kind of, you know, uh, lead the way forward and whatnot. But I think this sense of, that invulnerability is something that I think we need to work on because certainly the executive roles I've had where I've owned owned P&Ls, and you've had the same experience. The first time I became an entrepreneur, a business, whether it's a small business or a large enterprise, requires more of an individual than that individual is capable of providing.
Hmm.
Right. So I remember in the early days, people say, how's business going? I said, the business would be great if I wasn't running it because every day, right, there are things the business demands that may not be in your wheelhouse, may not be your strength. And so I think particularly for new leaders, understanding that it's not all going to be about you. In fact, an accelerator is knowing what you're really good at, knowing where you add real value, but then also understanding how you can be better by surrounding yourself with people that bring different mindsets, different, capabilities. It's not a new idea.
Hmm.
You've written about it. I've written about it. Others have. And yet in practice, it's, I think, a common trap that we fall into, right?
Yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
what also happens is it's how we measure and reward leaders, right? We tend to still reward people for individual accomplishment, and we also use short-term success to proclaim someone a hero. I mean, I wrote about this in the leadership contract. I was in a pharmaceutical company where, um, we had a marketing manager and we had we had a drug in a therapeutic area where the market itself was growing by 30% year over year, which meant our competitors were growing by 30% year over year.
Hmm.
And because we were growing by 30% year over year, everyone proclaimed him the hero. He was a rock star. He became the symbol of great leadership in that company until a new competitor came in with a similar product at half the price and
Ah.
completely disrupted that therapeutic class. All of a sudden, literally within 6 months, our sales went down. There was no solution. He was fired. Right? It was not all on him. Right? And knowing him, he didn't see himself as a hero, but he started buying the story that they were being told when he was put on that pedestal. Right? So I think we've got to catch ourselves in that and make sure we're not doing that within organizations. Because what we do then is we don't really acknowledge those community builders who aren't looking for fame or adulation, are just looking to help a company be successful, drive results. And everybody who's going to be listening or watching this, you know who you are. You're one of them. And you probably feel a bit ignored, a bit slighted. And the great CEOs and the great senior executives spot them and recognize them, right? But a lot don't. And so they feel a bit marginalized, they feel ignored, and yet they show up every day doing the same stuff, right?
Well, it segues very nicely to a couple of the 10 characteristics of strong community leaders I wanted to get into. And again, they're all fantastic. However, the seventh one, where leaders break down silos and collaborate effectively, I thought to myself, well, there's a leader who ultimately has checked hubris at the door because again, back to our point of what you've alluded to, it's like, okay, you have to do more than just say, I'm building community. You have to actually do the work. And that's the actual breaking down of the silos and collaborating. I mean, there's two parts of it. You can't just connect people and say, hey, I'm breaking down a silo. There's actually verb there to
Yeah.
collaborate. So tell me a bit, unpack that one for me and how important that is to the community of leaders.
Well, we hear it all the time, right? We're stuck in silos.
Hmm.
We don't know each other. I mean, I did a session years back. It was in the healthcare space, but it was a research-based organization with a lot of PhDs, researchers. And they finally brought together their top, I think, 60 leaders for the first time, right? So this is what happens. If you don't have those kind of mechanisms that bring leaders together so they can build relationships, it becomes important. So two of the leaders admitted that they had been with the organization about 8 years. They had worked together on joint projects, and that was the first time they ever met in person. This was like pre-COVID,
Yeah.
right? And they were like literally, in this office tower, separated by like 3 floors. And when I hear that, my brain hurts because I kind of go, wait a minute. In those 8 years, you never thought to kind of take an elevator ride or go down to the cafeteria, grab a coffee, bring it up to your colleague, and go, hey, we're working together on this thing. Like, who are you as a
Wow.
person? And what are you working on? And how might we be able to work together? So what I find, I don't know what your experience is, but when the conversation around silos come up, we think the solution is always structural. We're not
Mhm.
organized in the right way. And I think the biggest barrier, like in that example, is their mental silos that prevent us from, oh, I shouldn't be talking to that person. Well, what's the point? And it's like, no, 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 break down the mental silos first because it opens you up to do some amazing things. And everybody knows what the solution is. They always say in a session, yeah, we got to break down silos. What do we got to do? We got to get to know each other. Okay, check. Start doing that. We got to get our teams together. Good, check. Do that. Like it's not complicated stuff. It's just having that deliberateness and making sure that that becomes a priority rather than being consumed by the day-to-day activity that keeps you focused on just your agenda.
It's so true, which is then followed up by the sort of practice and community of leaders of the top 10 or the 10 at least, number 8. And you say leaders keep internal politics and personal agendas to a minimum. So it's like, okay, we need to break down the silos, but then there's also those folks that still have the hubris of themselves and like, okay, I'm going to go water cooler talk. I'm going to spread this myth or agenda this way, that way. So
Yeah.
why is that so important to mitigate or at least to debunk?
Well, I think because what it does is it acts as a significant blocker to everything else,
Mm.
right? And we all know when it's happening. So by making it explicit in the top 10 characteristics, again, all this, grounded in work with organizations. This is sort of, Vince, dreamed this up one weekend, in his basement in a whiteboard. It was all anchored around. So what is that barrier, right? And so this one is a common one, and it plays out in many different ways. So this company I referenced earlier when we had the rock star, head of marketing. In that company, sales and marketing, the two heads, every day duked it out for who really ran the company. So there was this political game going on between the two of them around who was really better, who was really more valuable for the company. And the dysfunction that it created beneath them, where the teams wouldn't want to work together, and yet, in any company, sales and marketing better get on the same page if you're going to be successful. And so that was so dysfunctional, right? So I think, and we have a leadership culture diagnostic that really measures the top 10. And by just having that on a radar map where they see it, there's no hiding when we're working with senior leaders, right? And if it's seen as high, then it gives us an opportunity to say, okay, well, let's understand what's going on. Let's understand the price you're paying as a result of it. And let's understand what a different scenario could look like. So we don't come at any of this in a judgmental way. We come at it saying, well, let's understand where we are. We're going to be strong in some areas, mediocre in others, weak in others, and let's look at how we can kind of get better. And then the other thing is, how do you call it out, right? Day to day when you see that behavior out of self-interest. We recently worked with top 60 leaders of a company that were going through a leadership and strategy session. And we started to look at, and we said, when you come into this meeting, you got to come in with your company hat on.
Mm.
So we're going to be talking about strategic priorities, and we're going to be talking about which are going to get investment and which may not get investment. So what's going to happen is the second you start smelling like, oh, my priority may not get investment, you're going to start spinning, and you might start getting a bit political. You might start reacting. We're gonna catch you when that's happening. We're not judging the reaction, but you need to understand that sometimes you need to be able to step back, look at the big picture, and realize, no, it's actually best for the company as a whole that my part of this gets shrunk for this year because we need to grow or drive other priorities in other areas that need more investment. And every time I've seen a leader who has that ability to say, you know what? I'm not going to fight this. We got to divert, these 10 hires to this other area. Let's do that. And it completely changes the dynamic in the room. It just accelerates how people now feel like, oh, we're in this together. We're not fighting over resources. So those are some tangible ways how that one plays out.
Well, and it takes humility looking at the bigger picture rather than the selfish, righteous interest of yourself and your
Yeah.
unit or even just your team, which, however, then again, it's like we planned this and we didn't. But you talk about in the book then sort of the frozen by doubt syndrome, which you've cleverly coined the LDD, or otherwise known as the leadership dread disorder. And you sort of point out, Vince, that this frozen by doubt, this sort of daunting aspect of, oh my God, I've got to lead. You mean I've got to think about the bigger picture, the community? So what is it? First of all, LDD, which is so good. And then how do we mitigate being LDD leaders?
Well, leadership dread disorder, again, came out in our work where, an example, in the book is we finished with a 2-day sort of strategy leadership session with an executive team. And by the end of it, and the CEO had a vision of the process, had a vision of where to go forward. But because his executives were so focused in their own areas, it was very hard to have a conversation around what do we need to do as the executive team to drive this company as a whole. And so at the end, you do the typical debrief, and he was very quiet, very pensive. And I gave him the space, and then he said, "I don't have the leaders I need."
Mm,
And that moment is one of huge anxiety because they realized now he was hoping, but then that like the lights finally came on. So then I play a little sort of activity where I say, "Hey, I have my perspective. Let's have your perspective. Who's in and who's out?"
mm,
Now, most people don't know this happens,
right.
right? Most people aren't aware that this is what goes on, but this is what goes on, right? And and it wasn't all of them. It was two, and we both picked the same people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because you can tell how someone shows up, right?
Yeah.
And then we said, okay, so what are we going to do? Either you can just like get rid of them right away, or you can support the development, give them some time, and that's what he decided to do. And unfortunately, after that period of time, which was about 6 months, he decided no, we needed to. There just was a misfit around values, not buying into the strategy. And what ended up happening was, as he brought in two new people, by exiting those two, the other people just elevated themselves.
Yeah.
So, it was addition through subtraction. And now it gave him an opportunity to go out and either promote or find the leader that he actually needed for the future. This is the reality of the work you and I do. We don't talk about it a lot, but this is the stuff that happens at the senior level around these issues. So that leadership dread disorder is when we feel that sense of, oh my goodness, I either have a lot to do and I'm doubting myself, which is okay.
Hmm.
I actually don't mind that reaction rather than overconfidence. Or you look and you see, I don't have the leaders I need. But it also happens the other way. Our research, and it's in the book, where we ask, how well are your senior leaders working together? The employee numbers are not very positive.
Mm.
In fact, employees can have leadership dread disorder. And I believe, to extend it further, I think people in countries have leadership dread disorder when they look at their political leaders
Yeah.
and kind of go, really, this is the best we can do? And we all can relate to that feeling. That's a form of leadership dread disorder.
Oh gosh, I could chat with you forever. So my last one for you, Vince, is really about the recurring theme of leaders and the necessity to employ patience and perseverance, because to foster that community or to build community of leadership and leaders um, is sort of a reconciliation that has to happen because leaders are under such pressure to deliver in short-termism ways, to hit the number for the quarter, whatever it is, customer sat, ESAT, revenue sat, etc. So how does one as a leader reconcile the need for now with the fact that, as both you and I know, it takes perseverance and patience to build out that community as you're mitigating through kind of the 10 characteristics of a community of leaders?
Yeah, well, I think the sense is as I describe in each of the chapters where I talk about the 10 characteristics, what helps nudging things forward is those accelerators that you put into place and those
Mm,
blockers that either you catch yourself doing or you see others doing that you address, right? So I think that's so there. The book's got a ton of ideas on how to do that. But I think it's also to your point that unrelenting pressure, I think keeps you head down,
hmm
and then it kind of gets in the way of you carving out the time you need to do the things that are going to build that community over time, right? It's always this tension that I think a lot of leaders face. Like, well, investing in relationship, nice to, it's a nice to have, but I don't have time to do it.
Yeah,
Bringing two teams together to talk about common priorities, nice to have, I don't have the time to do it. But it's almost like, but if I did those things,
exactly.
if I did those things, a lot of the other stuff would go away because we would execute better, we would feel better, we would do the extraordinary, and you just have more hands to help you be successful. And I think that's the shift that leaders need to think about.
Well, another fellow Canadian, David Chilton in The Wealthy Barber, told us to, invest 10% of our earnings for the future. It's like, well, why aren't we investing at least 10% of our time for an easier, more productive community of other leaders within the organization? It's like the math to me screams sanity, but it's the
Yeah.
insanity, Vince, that happens because it's your point. We're not investing the time to have a dividend downstream.
Well, the other thing that I have found, it comes up a lot, is remember when I said there is work that, depending on your level, that you alone really can do because of your job, your experience, and whatnot.
hmm
And what becomes important is you have to think of yourself as you need to free yourself to be able to do that. And the critical variable is building a strong team that you lead. And if you don't, your day is going to be filled with firefighting, resolving conflicts, fixing up messes, and you'll never get the time to do what you can uniquely do.
hmm
And so, certainly, how do you build an accountable team? How do you build a sense of community of the team where the team kind of almost operate on its own without you? And then um, you're free to do it. And the really astute executives and leaders we work with understand it. Years ago, we worked with a group in an energy company, and this was the generation division. A new executive came in, and she would tell her leader saying, "I need you to run this business because I need to be working with the board and the CEO on these like long-term priorities."
hmm
And they took that as a negative message, like they weren't important. And it wasn't until we did a leadership program where the lights came on for all of them, and they said, "Oh, she's asking us to run the business." Yeah, she actually believes in you that you can run the business.
Right.
Oh, we got this all wrong. Yeah, you got this all wrong. Right? So she was an executive who understood I have a bucket of work that I alone can do. And I need my team strong enough that they run this division without me getting involved in the weeds. And until they came to that collective insight, they were struggling and distracted. And I think that's she to me is a great executive who understands that dynamic of the power of a strong team. Now, what that also means is if you're tied in back to your early point, if you're tied into being a hero, you like nothing more than a mess to happen. You like
Yeah,
nothing more than
right.
a project to derail, so you can swoop in to save the day versus
Woo!
saying, "Yeah, serve the day." No, no, I got to build a strong team so I can go off and be a hero somewhere else.
That's so good. Amazing. Okay. Vince, I could chat with you forever. We've been friends for a while, but this is such an impactful book. Not that the others haven't been, but I just love it. It's Community of Leaders, what it takes, sorry, to drive strategy, culture, and change. Where can we find out more about the great Vince Molinaro?
Well, the our company website is a lead with sorry leadwithlci.com, and the book is available at all retailers. Indigo, Amazon, as I'm losing my voice. You got me all emotional as we're talking
Emotional.
about community of leaders.
Well, thank you for this. Thank you for your continued excellence and contributions to the world in which we need a little bit more Vinces, quite honestly, and the way that you pragmatically have brought community and always accountability in this alignment is just such good work. And thank you again, Vince.
Thanks for the opportunity, Dan. Great to see you, and appreciate having me on your podcast. All the best.
All right, folks, that was Vince Molinaro. Again, the book is Community of Leaders, What It Takes to Drive Strategy, Culture, and Change. Pick it up wherever you can. In the show notes will be links to Vince's site, the book, and many other goodies that he's got in store for you. We'll see you next time.